The top business stories, live from the Sky Newsroom. A last-minute breakthrough in Brexit agreement sparks hope among businesses for the return of EU nationals to the UK. British property enters a buyer's market despite asking prices hitting a record high. And a major credit card agency upends US markets by downgrading its rating on US government debts. Very good afternoon on this Monday, Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. Well, the UK has finally come to a post-Brexit agreement with the European Union after lengthy negotiations. But talks on some issues will continue, not least of all on a youth mobility scheme to allow people aged between 18 to 30 to move freely between the UK and EU member states for a limited period of time. Well, let's talk about this a little bit more with Neil Carberry. He is Chief Executive of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation and former Managing Director at the Confederation of British Industry. Neil, very good afternoon to you. Just first of all, I mean, what's your perception of what you've seen from this deal? As I say, lots of details still need to be worked out, but your initial reaction?
Well, good afternoon, Darren. I think across most businesses in the UK, guarded good news today. There's a lot in here that addresses some of the pain points businesses have felt, particularly around food at the border, with this new potential for a sanitary and phytosanitary deal. That's good news. Businesses will welcome moves towards youth mobility and other areas where it becomes easier to do business in Europe from the UK. And the way to think about this, I think, for most businesses, this isn't about going back on Brexit. This is another good trade deal, like the trade deals we've done recently with the US and with India. It just happens that this one is the most significant because by geography, Europe is our closest and biggest trading partner.
Neil, from your understanding, though, are we talking here about kind of a return to the old school Erasmus scheme? Are we talking about the deal that Britain has with other nation states, with Australia, I think Canada, New Zealand and others, for example, that students come here for a limited period of time and do some work? What's your understanding of where we may well land with this?
Well, there's two different strands here. One is a university cooperation scheme for students, the EU's Erasmus scheme. Brussels has always been really keen on the UK re-entering Erasmus. There is a cost associated with that. But actually the thing that businesses are most interested in is this question of a youth mobility deal. We do have that with other countries, where you give people a period to come into the UK and work if they're under a certain age. It's often 30. That has some real potential, as it does with other countries, to allow British young people to work around Europe and build up the skills, but also for people to come here. And a great example is lots of major professional services firms have Europe-wide graduate schemes. It's much easier to base them in the UK and draw people to the UK and invest in the UK if you can get graduates from all over Europe into a base in London. We have seen some of those schemes starting to drift away to bases inside the EU recently.
Well, what about, though, Neil, people saying there are a lot of people actually not at work in this country, particularly young people who have taken off sick in recent years, and that we will be much better as a country expending our energies trying to get those young people into some form of work rather than potentially people from European countries coming over and filling those job posts?
Well, I mean, that's a classic trade-off that doesn't really exist. Of course, we need to focus much more on the skills pathway for our.
Can I ask why it isn't a trade-off, though? I mean, there only are a certain number of jobs.
Well, that's not true. There aren't a certain number of jobs. If we can get the economy to grow, there will be more jobs. So my argument would be that basing major graduate programs in London will create more jobs in London, basing them there, and that will create opportunity for British young people to have opportunities here, as well as carefully managing a youth mobility deal with Europe, as we have with lots of other countries. It's really important, though, to say that none of this is a replacement for the kind of investment in our skills system that we know businesses and government will need to do. And that's an important part of the industrial strategy that we're looking for from the government in the next few weeks.
OK, Neil, appreciate your time this afternoon from the Recruitment and Employment Federation. Thank you very much indeed. Now, spring is usually a busy season for estate agents. However, the property market appears to have somewhat slowed. The first quarter of the year saw a rush of activity, of course, as buyers looked to complete deals before those stamp duty thresholds dropped. That's according to the latest house price index from Rightmove. Well, let's speak to Colleen Babcock, who is from Rightmove and joins us now. Very good afternoon to you, Colleen. Just talk us through what's happened here, because the housing market seems to have slowed down a little, but asking prices have gone up.
Well, I think it's fair to say that we've seen a little bit of a lull in what is traditionally a really strong market in the late spring. So we did see those prices going up this month, but we saw the lowest rise we've seen since 2016 in May. And that's largely down to the fact that there's a decade high of available homes for sale, and that's limiting price growth.
And do we know why there's a record high of homes available? We're constantly told we're in the midst of a housing crisis, and yet there seems to be quite a few on the market.
There's still sellers looking to move and looking to move for various reasons. I think there was a lot of activity that was front-loaded, as you said, in the first part of this year, and people still looking to move now and coming onto the market for various reasons across the country.
Do we know how geographically it's working this out? Is it better in some places than others? Effectively, are there more houses available in certain parts of the country?
Absolutely. So we're seeing the most number of new houses coming on in actually the southwest, and Wales is the next place where we've seen the most number of homes come on. And what's at play in those coastal areas in particular is that there's a premium going on with council tax. And that's prompted a lot of people who have second homes to put their housing on the market. Certainly when I've been speaking to agents working in Wales, for example, that's been the case that they've been seeing really since October.
And we've got a lot of economic uncertainty around, clearly. You know, the UK economy not doing too badly, but it's not certainly going gangbusters. But we are expecting greater interest rate cuts, aren't we, later on this year? What impact do you think that's going to have?
Well, we've already started to see some impact from that, actually. So in April, we saw a bit of a dip in buyer demand, and that was likely due to uncertainty around what was happening with Trump's approach to tariffs, and also the end of that stamp duty holiday, which completed at the end of March. But what our real-time data has shown is that actually we've started to see a bit of an uptake in inquiries from buyers in the beginning part of May. And that may be because the base rate was cut by the Bank of England on the 8th of May. And as you say, we're expecting a couple of more potential cuts as we go through the rest of the year.
OK, Anna there from Rightmove. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's get more on that UK-EU reset deal announced today, because we've heard from some of the big supermarkets this afternoon, Asda and Morrison's among the businesses welcoming the ability to send some meat and fish to the continent again. Let's have a look at what Asda's had to say in a statement this afternoon. They said this has the potential to significantly reduce costs and bureaucracy, both for the fresh produce we import from the EU and the goods we move every day to our customers in Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, Morrison's have also said sweeping away trade barriers with the EU will remove cost, complexity and delay in food imports from the continent. This promises to ease a source of pressure on food prices and is therefore good news for shoppers. Well, let's have a look a bit more at the geopolitics now and speak to Anna Rosenberg. Anna, very good afternoon to you. Just first of all, there's a lot of politics today. We're seeing that play out, aren't we, with the various political parties here in the UK. But what does this mean economically for Britain and indeed for the EU? Because, yes, it is a deal, but it's not going to massively move the dial, is it?
No, I think this is much more about building confidence, right? This is the first reset, if you will. There's likely going to be more. You are right that economically the impact is not going to be massive, but at a time of huge political uncertainty, especially in the US, we're building confidence, right? So this is a good thing, and I think it's going to make investors more confident, consumers more confident, and that overall is going to the right direction.
What do you think when you look at the deal here? You know, kind of fishing was clearly quite important for the European Union, wasn't, along with a return of some form of freedom of movement, even on a limited basis. Well, what do you think the great wins were for the UK?
I think we shouldn't overemphasize fishing too much. Ultimately, this is about much bigger geopolitical changes, and it's about defense. It's quite likely that the EU is going to spend a whole lot more on defense simply because the direction of travel between Russia and Ukraine is not going to be necessarily a positive one. And that means that the deal will allow UK firms to benefit from greater European defense spending over many years. And given that the UK has quite a sophisticated, if you will, military firms, expertise, research and technology, that should benefit the UK in the longer term.
Let's talk just briefly, if we can, because I noticed that Asda, I think, in their statement, talked about Northern Ireland, which has kind of been in this slightly unusual place, kind of half inside the old EU, if you like, and obviously having access to the British single market. Does this mean significant change for Northern Ireland?
I don't think so. I think in a way they have been beneficiaries, right? They have benefiting from the status quo, being being a region that was able to take advantage of both sides, and it's not going to be a massive game changer for them at this point. We have to keep in mind that what has been agreed so far is quite small.
Well, isn't that the point, I suppose? So it is quite small. So where next? If this is a first stage, where do you think these negotiations go next? And I say that because at a certain point, the UK is going to hit against the kind of customs wall, isn't it, in essence, that it needs to think about if it really wants a proper trading relationship with the EU again in a comprehensive way, that it may well need to rejoin that customs union. Is that fair?
And not necessarily. You know, in this environment, we are seeing politicians be extraordinarily creative in order to make ends meet, if you will. And clearly, we are going to be able to take more baby steps towards additional deals without going into the customs union. Starmer has repeatedly said that's a political no-go. So we'll likely find willingness to negotiate other agreements on, we've seen it now on food. There may be other product lines. We can see new agreements, chemicals, etc. We'll see more agreements there without entering into the customs union in full. I think there's going to be willingness on both sides to be creative, simply because also the Europeans have an interest in getting to UK closer tied to them for the same reason that I mentioned earlier. It's defense. The UK has quite sophisticated capabilities, and at a time of big geopolitical uncertainty, the Europeans want to have the UK closer too, so there's going to be willingness on both sides to be creative.
Yeah, and I suppose isn't that the final point, that in the end there is kind of this reciprocal kind of benefit for both, in the sense that they look across the Atlantic, they look maybe to an uncertain trading partner. And aside from the defence, at the end of the day, the UK is still, fifth, sixth largest economy in the world, and it is on the EU's doorstep, as in, the old argument from Brexiteers, which had validity, is that, Europeans will want as much access to 70 million people on these islands as much as they can get.
Keep in mind, the UK now, we're in an environment where the US is walking away from globalization. Yet the UK has recently, achieved a few new deals with the US, with India, and now with the EU. So that is a big different change in direction. They're embracing globalization, and that is going to build confidence, and that's going to be good for the UK, and it's going to benefit Europe overall and attract investment.
OK. And just before we go, because I was going to stop there, but I just do want to ask one question. What would you say to, and there'll be people watching who do and have support Brexit and feel that we are giving too much away, and again ceding control to, have Brussels interfere in terms of certain sectors of our economic life, and that goes against what people voted for. Even economically, Are they right about that we have ceded some ground today?
I mean, firstly, I am not sure voters actually voted for what we have today. If you remember correctly, the promises that were made before the Brexit vote were very different from what ultimately ended up being the case. This is, when you think about rules and regulations, we are in an environment of deregulation. Regulations are being pulled back everywhere, including in the EU, to allow for a more competitive environment. I think ultimately the UK is going to benefit from that and is going to influence it too.
OK, and I really appreciate your time this afternoon from the Mundi Investment Institute. Thank you very much indeed. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Going to be looking at something a little different after the break, looking at the markets and the impact potentially the downgrading of US debt has had, not just in the US, but on the UK too. All that and much more after the break.
Show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Fly Emirates. Fly better. Thank you.
Welcome back. Let's have a look at those markets in a bit more detail. Let's speak to Anna MacDonald, investment manager at Aubrey Capital Management. Anna, very good afternoon to you. Let's start with US debt downgraded by Moody's over the weekend.
Yes, Moody's is the last of the three big rating agencies to downgrade the debt, and that has that led to a few wobbles. First thing, in the US dollar, in the US fixed income markets, and in the stock markets, but there has been a bit of a recovery. So I think that some of the investors have taken it in their stride, not considering it a big game changer. But it does highlight that the US is a very indebted country and that there are concerns over it. So that those longer dated interest rates are being pushed up, and they're now at levels that haven't been seen for quite a long time.
Now, one of the ways that Donald Trump says he's going to try and bring down that debt is obviously with tariffs, but those tariffs have had consequences as well for some big names, Walmart and Diageo.
Yes. Over the weekend, Trump was on Truth Social telling Walmart that he would be watching them closely, and so would their customers, if they tried to pass through the tariff increases in the form of price rises to consumers. And that's because Walmart had been saying that they might have to do that when they were talking to the markets last week. So he was saying that Walmart should eat the tariffs and how much money they were making, and that they should be careful about what they do. So actually their shares opened a little bit down today, but they have recovered a bit. Diageo have also said that tariffs are going to hit the business, and they've seen a lot of advance ordering as Americans try to get all the goods in before those tariffs hit.
Yeah, and of course, Diageo owns a lot of Scottish whisky, for example. It does a lot of the distilleries in Scotland. I interviewed Michael O'Leary a little earlier on today, of course, the chief executive of Ryanair. Profits down slightly, but they had 200 million passengers last year, and they are expecting a pretty good summer, which has boosted the airlines.
Yes, EasyJet and Wizz Air are also up today, as well as Ryanair hitting an all-time high. They're Europe's biggest airline now, and they're seeing really strong summer demand, which is really helpful for them. He was also saying that it seems that European-based travellers are quite happy not to be going transatlantic at the moment and holidaying within Europe, which is really positive for them and the other more European-based carriers like an EasyJet or Wizz Air.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, Anna, that, as you say, lots of people are not travelling across the Atlantic at the moment, given the politics in North America. Just very briefly, in 20 seconds, NVIDIA, who've had a pretty stellar week last week.
Yes, and Jason Young's in Taiwan at the Computex, I suppose it's a big conference, and he's talking about allowing other chips to be used alongside NVIDIA chips, and he's really trying to design NVIDIA into the center of everything, so it remains at the very heart of everything we're seeing within data centers and AI.
Anna, great stuff. As always, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Anna MacDonald there from Aubrey Capital Management, live from Edinburgh. OK, that is it from me on Business Live for today. Of course, we're back at 11:30 tomorrow morning. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin, with continuing coverage of that UK-EU trade deal, the politics and the business with Mark at 5. And I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.